The morning fog rolled thick over Belmont County, Pennsylvania, the kind that made the old coal towns look like ghosts of themselves. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Reeves sat alone in the corner booth of Maggie's diner, the same booth she'd claimed every morning for the past 3 weeks since returning home. Her coffee had gone cold 20 minutes ago, but she held the cup anyway, letting the ceramic warm her calloused hands. "More coffee, hun?" Maggie asked, pot already tilting toward the cup. Sarah nodded, offering a small smile. Maggie was one of the few people in Belmont who didn't look at her like she was broken. At the counter, 3 off-duty police officers huddled over their breakfast plates. Sarah recognized them from the county sheriff's department: Gary Mitchell, Tom Brennan, and the youngest one, Kyle something. Their voices carried across the empty diner. "I'm telling you, bringing in outside help is a mistake," Gary said, loud enough to be intentional. "Especially some washed-up seal who couldn't hack it anymore." Sarah's jaw tightened, but she kept her eyes on her coffee. "Female too," Tom added with a snort. "No offense to women, but special operations. Come on, probably got through on some quota system." "I heard she cracked," Kyle said, his voice uncertain, like he was testing whether he should join in. "Some mission went sideways overseas. That's why she's back here instead of still active." Sarah had heard it all before. The whispers started the day she returned to Belmont, the town she'd left 12 years ago as a scared 18-year-old with something to prove. She'd proven it too. Navy SEAL, one of the first women to complete Bud-S training and earn her trident. 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq, more classified operations than she could count. Then Kabul happened. She could still see Corporal Danny Vasquez's face, the young Marine who'd been assigned to her unit for a joint operation. 22 years old, 3 months from going home to his family in Arizona. The IED had been buried too deep for their equipment to detect. Sarah had been walking point, but Danny had spotted something. A wire, a disturbed patch of dirt, she never knew what, and shoved her aside just as the world exploded. She'd carried what was left of him for 2 miles to the extraction point. The Navy said it wasn't her fault. They said she'd performed admirably, that she'd saved 3 other lives that day. They offered her counseling, commendations, and a new assignment. But Sarah couldn't stop seeing Danny's mother at the funeral, couldn't stop hearing herself say, "I'm sorry," knowing it would never be enough. So she'd requested leave, then early retirement. At 30, she was done with war. Or so she thought. "You hear Chief Morrison brought her in as some kind of consultant," Gary continued at the counter. "We've been policing this county for 20 years. What's some outsider gonna tell us about our own backyard?" Maggie caught Sarah's eye and mouthed, "Ignore them." Sarah stood, leaving a $10 bill on the table for a $6 breakfast. As she walked toward the door, the conversation at the counter died. "Morning, Lieutenant Commander," Gary said, his tone dripping with false respect. Sarah paused, turned. "It's just Sarah now, I'm retired." "Right," Gary's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Well, welcome home." Outside, the fog was beginning to lift, revealing the tired main street of Belmont. Half the storefronts were empty, victims of the coal industry's collapse and the jobs that went with it. The people who remained were proud, stubborn, and suspicious of outsiders, even if that outsider had been born here. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Chief Morrison: "Can you come by the station? Need to talk." She climbed into her old Ford pickup, her father's truck really, left to her when he passed 2 years ago, and headed toward the county sheriff's station. Chief Robert Morrison was 62, with silver hair and the weathered face of someone who'd spent 40 years trying to hold a dying town together. He stood when Sarah entered his office, gesturing to a chair. "Thanks for coming," he said. "Your text sounded urgent." Morrison sighed, sinking back into his seat. "I'm going to be straight with you, Sarah. I brought you in because I'm desperate and you're the most qualified person I know, but there's resistance." "I noticed." Gary and his crew, they're good cops, but they're set in their ways. They don't understand what we're up against. Morrison pulled a folder from his desk, sliding it across to her. 3 months ago, we started seeing changes. New faces in town, outsiders. Men in expensive cars, staying at the old Riverside Motel. Then came the drugs. Sarah opened the folder. Photos of small baggies filled with pills, white powder, crime scene photos. Fentanyl, heroin, meth, Morrison continued. We've had drug problems before, but this is different. This is organized, professional. We've made a few arrests, low-level dealers, addicts, but we can't get to the source. You think it's Mafia? Sarah asked. Morrison hesitated. 2 weeks ago, Officer Jake Chen started investigating on his own time. He was good, Sarah. Young, idealistic, but good. He had a K-9 partner, a German shepherd named Atlas. Sarah noticed Morrison's use of past tense. What happened? The chief's hands trembled slightly as he opened another folder. Sarah had seen a lot in her military career, things that would haunt anyone. But what she saw in those photos made her stomach turn. Officer Jake Chen, hanging from a railroad bridge outside town. His K-9, Atlas, hanging beside him. Both had been dead for hours before anyone found them. Jesus, Sarah whispered. There was a message, Morrison said quietly, carved into the bridge support, mind your business. Sarah looked up. You think Jake got too close? I know he did. He told me a week before he died that he'd identified a pattern, shipments coming through town, always on Sunday nights, always between midnight and 3 a.m. He was trying to track where they were going. And you want me to finish what he started? Morrison met her eyes. The state police are stretched thin. The FBI won't get involved without more evidence. My own department is either too scared or too skeptical to take this seriously. Gary thinks Jake's death was a suicide, that the pressure got to him. Can you believe that? Jake Chen, who coached Little League and volunteered at the senior center, supposedly hung himself and his dog out of despair. Sarah studied the photos again. The knots were professional, not the fumbling work of someone in emotional distress. The positioning was deliberate, theatrical. This was a message, a warning. What makes you think I can do what Jake couldn't? She asked. Morrison leaned forward. Because you've been in war zones. You've faced enemies who don't follow rules, who use fear as a weapon. This isn't about investigating anymore, Sarah. This is about survival. These people, whoever they are, they're bringing war to Belmont. And I need a soldier. Sarah closed the folder, her mind already working through possibilities, threats, tactical approaches. This was different from Afghanistan, different from kicking down doors in Fallujah. This was home. I'll need access to everything Jake was working on, she said. His notes, his files, everything. Done. And I work alone. Your officers don't trust me, and I don't need them getting in the way or tipping off the wrong people. Morrison hesitated. Sarah, that's dangerous. So is sending in people who don't believe there's a real threat. The chief nodded slowly. Okay, but you report to me every day. I need to know you're safe. Sarah stood. I stopped worrying about safe a long time ago, Chief. That afternoon, Sarah sat in her small rental house on the edge of town, surrounded by Jake Chen's files. The young officer had been meticulous, documenting everything. License plates, times, locations, suspicious individuals. One name appeared repeatedly, Vincent Calabrese. Sarah pulled up everything she could find online. Calabrese was 68, a supposed retired businessman from Philadelphia who'd moved to Belmont 6 months ago. He'd purchased the old Riverside Motel and had been renovating it ever since, though the work seemed to progress at a glacial pace. Jake's notes suggested Calabrese wasn't retired at all. He was connected to the Morty crime family, one of the smaller but notoriously violent mafia organizations operating in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. If they were expanding into rural areas like Belmont, It meant law enforcement pressure in the cities was pushing them to find new territory. Sarah studied photos Jake had taken from a distance. Men in suits entering the motel, trucks arriving late at night, packages being loaded and unloaded. She understood now why Jake had died. He'd gotten close enough to threaten their operation. And they'd made an example of him. Heavy breathing on the other end, then a voice, male, distorted like someone speaking through a cloth. "Stop asking questions. Stop looking. Leave town. You have 48 hours. "Who is this?" "Someone trying to save your life. They know about you. They know what happened in Kabul. They know you're broken. They'll use that. Leave now or you'll end up like Chen and his dog." The line went dead. Sarah sat in the silence of her house, her heart pounding. They knew she was investigating. They knew her history, and they were confident enough to threaten her directly. Most people would have been terrified. Most people would have called Chief Morrison, maybe taken the warning seriously. But Sarah Reeves wasn't most people. She'd lost friends in Afghanistan. She'd carried Danny Vasquez's body through enemy fire. She'd stared down Taliban fighters and survived firefights that would have broken trained soldiers. Some Mafia thugs didn't scare her. But they should have scared themselves because they'd just made a critical mistake. They'd threatened a Navy SEAL who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Sarah pulled out her laptop and began mapping the area around the Riverside Motel, identifying sight lines, access points, and observation positions. If they wanted to watch her, she'd watch them first. Outside her window, the sun was setting over Belmont, painting the old coal town in shades of orange and red. Somewhere out there, Jake Chen's killers were celebrating their power, confident that fear would protect them. The Riverside Motel sat like a rotting tooth on the edge of town, its faded sign flickering erratically in the autumn wind. Sarah observed it from a wooded hillside 300 yards away, her binoculars sweeping across the parking lot. Two vehicles, a black Cadillac Escalade and a silver Mercedes sedan, both with Pennsylvania plates. She'd been watching for 3 hours, since just after midnight. Her body remembered this kind of patience from reconnaissance missions overseas, the ability to remain motionless, to control breathing, to become part of the landscape. At 2:17 a.m., a white panel van pulled into the parking lot. Sarah adjusted her focus, capturing the license plate with her phone camera. Two men emerged from the motel, one tall and thin, the other shorter and broad-shouldered. They greeted the van driver with familiar nods, no tension in their body language. This was routine. They unloaded 6 large boxes, working quickly but not frantically. Whatever was in those boxes, it wasn't their first shipment. Sarah documented everything: times, faces, vehicle details. This was what Jake Chen had been doing in the days before he died. The van departed at 2:34 a.m. The two men carried the boxes inside. Lights went off in the motel office. Silence returned to the riverside. Sarah waited another hour before slipping down from her observation point, moving through the darkness like she'd been trained. She'd learned something valuable tonight. The shipments were real and they followed a pattern. Sunday night, early Monday morning. Clockwork. But she'd also learned something else. As she'd watched the motel, she'd noticed a sedan parked on the access road behind her position. It had been there when she arrived and stayed put the entire night. Someone was watching the watchers. These people were more sophisticated than she'd expected. The next morning, Sarah walked into Maggie's diner to find Gary Mitchell holding court at his usual spot. The moment she entered, his voice rose deliberately. "Did you hear? Someone was trespassing up on Miller's Ridge last night. Old man Miller called it in around 3 a.m., said he saw someone sneaking around with binoculars." Sarah ordered coffee at the counter, keeping her expression neutral. "Probably kids," Tom Brennan suggested. "Maybe," Gary said, his eyes finding Sarah in the mirror behind the counter. Or maybe someone who doesn't understand how things work around here. Someone who thinks they can play soldier in a civilian town. Sarah turned to face him directly. "You have something to say to me, Officer Mitchell." Gary stood, his face flushing. "Yeah, I do. We've been policing this county for decades without any help from outsiders. Jake Chen's death was a tragedy, but that doesn't mean we need some washed-up SEAL running around playing vigilante." "Jake Chen was murdered," Sarah said quietly. "He and his K-9 were executed as a message." "That's not what the preliminary investigation suggests." "Then your preliminary investigation is wrong." Gary stepped closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You think you're special because you wore a uniform, because you did some classified missions you can't talk about. I've seen your type before. You come back broken, looking for purpose, trying to recapture the glory days. But this isn't Afghanistan, and we don't need your brand of justice here." Sarah held his gaze. "No, you just need the kind of justice that lets drug dealers murder cops without consequence." "That's enough," Maggie's voice cut through the tension. "Both of you out, I don't allow fighting in my diner." Sarah left money on the counter and walked out, feeling eyes on her back. The entire diner had witnessed the confrontation, and by noon, the whole town would know about it. Chief Morrison called her into his office that afternoon. His expression was grave. "I got a complaint from Gary," he said without preamble. "He says you're conducting unauthorized surveillance and harassing his officers." "Is that what he calls it?" Morrison rubbed his temples. "Sarah, you need to understand the position I'm in. Half my department thinks you're a liability. The county commissioners are asking questions about why I brought in a consultant without approval, and now I've got Gary filing formal complaints." "Jake Chen documented at least 8 suspicious shipments to the Riverside Motel," Sarah said, spreading photos across Morrison's desk. "I confirmed another one last night. These aren't random drug deals, Chief. This is organized distribution." Morrison studied the photos. "These were taken from private property." "Public land, actually. I checked the county maps." "You're splitting hairs." "I'm gathering evidence." Morrison sighed. "Evidence that won't hold up in court if it's obtained through questionable means. Sarah, I brought you in because I trust you, but I need you to work with me, not around me. Your officers don't want my help. Then change their minds. Show them you're not the enemy." Sarah gathered her photos. "The enemy is the organization that murdered Jake Chen. The enemy is the drugs flooding this town. The enemy is everyone who'd rather maintain comfortable denial than face an ugly truth." "That's not fair." "No," Sarah agreed. "What's not fair is Jake's family planning a funeral. What's not fair is that K-9 dying because his handler got too close to the truth. What's not fair is you asking me to play politics while people are dying." That evening, Sarah visited Jake Chen's widow, Linda. The small house on Maple Street still had children's toys in the yard. Jake and Linda had 2 kids, both under 6. A sympathy wreath hung on the front door. Linda answered, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. She'd probably cried herself out days ago. "Mrs. Chen, I'm Sarah Reeves. Chief Morrison asked me to look into your husband's death." Linda's expression hardened. "You're the SEAL everyone's talking about." "Yes, ma'am. People say you're stirring up trouble, that you're making things worse." Sarah met her eyes. "I'm trying to find out who killed your husband." Linda's composure cracked. "The department says Jake was depressed. They're treating it like a suicide. Do you know what that means for his life insurance? For my kid's future?" "I know your husband was murdered," Sarah said gently. "And I know whoever did it wants everyone to believe it was suicide. That's why I need your help." Linda hesitated, then opened the door wider. "Come in." The house was modest but warm, filled with photos of Jake in his uniform, Jake with Atlas, Jake with his family. Sarah felt the familiar weight of grief pressing down on her. Jake knew something was wrong in this town, Linda said, sitting on the couch. He came home 3 weeks ago and said he'd figured out a pattern. He was excited, said he was close to breaking a major case. Did he mention any names? Just one, Vincent Calabrese. Jake said he was the key to everything. Sarah pulled out her notebook. Did Jake seem worried, scared? No, that's what I keep telling people. He was energized. He felt like he was making a difference. Linda's voice broke. 2 days before he died, he told me, I'm going to make Belmont safe again for the kids. That's not something a suicidal person says. No, it's not. Then why won't anyone believe me? Linda's tears finally came. Why is everyone so eager to say my husband gave up? Sarah reached across and took Linda's hand. Because believing he was murdered means admitting there's something dangerous in this town. It means admitting they failed to protect him. It's easier to blame Jake than face the truth. But you believe me. I do, and I promise you, Mrs. Chen, I will find out who did this. Linda squeezed her hand. Jake kept a notebook, not his official one, a personal journal where he wrote down everything. I haven't given it to the department yet. I was afraid they'd dismiss it like everything else. Can I see it? Linda disappeared into the bedroom and returned with a worn leather journal. He hid it in our closet. I think he knew it might be dangerous for anyone to see it. Sarah opened the journal carefully. Jake's handwriting filled the pages, dates, times, observations, theories. The last entry was dated 2 days before his death. Vincent Calabrese meeting with unknown male, 62, expensive suit, scar on left cheek. Looked military or ex-law enforcement. They argued in parking lot. Heard Calabrese say, the seal won't be a problem, we have people who can handle her. Who is the seal? New player in town. Need to find out. Sarah's blood ran cold. Jake hadn't been killed because of what he discovered about Calabrese. He'd been killed because he was investigating threats against her, threats made before she'd even arrived in Belmont. This ran deeper than she'd thought. Mrs. Chen, I need to keep this journal. It's evidence. Linda nodded. Just promise me something. When you find them, when you find the people who did this, make sure everyone knows Jake died a hero. Make sure my kids know their father was brave. I promise. Sarah spent the next 2 days digging into Vincent Calabrese's background. The deeper she went, the uglier it got. Calabrese had been a mid-level enforcer for the Morty family for 40 years. He specialized in problem solving, a polite term for making witnesses disappear and intimidating anyone who threatened the organization. He'd been arrested 17 times but never convicted. Witnesses had a habit of recanting testimony or vanishing entirely. 6 months ago, he'd purchased the Riverside Motel through a shell corporation. Around the same time, overdose deaths in Belmont County had tripled. But the detail that chilled Sarah was this. 3 weeks before she'd even requested leave from the Navy, Calabrese had told associates he was preparing for federal interference. He'd somehow known she was coming before she knew it herself. Someone had tipped him off. Someone with access to military personnel records. Sarah's phone rang. Morrison. We need to talk, the chief said. Now my office. Something in his tone made Sarah's instincts flare. What's wrong? Just get here. 20 minutes later, Sarah sat across from Morrison. 2 state police investigators stood against the wall, their expressions unreadable. Sarah, Morrison began, his voice strained. I need you to tell me the truth. Have you been conducting unauthorized surveillance on Vincent Calabrese? I've been observing patterns of suspicious activity, yes. Have you trespassed on private property to do so? No. One of the state investigators stepped forward. Ms. Reeves, we have security footage from the Riverside Motel showing someone matching your description on the property 3 nights ago. Sarah's mind raced. She hadn't been on the motel property. She'd stayed in the woods on public land. That's impossible. I've been careful to stay within legal boundaries. The investigator pulled out a tablet, showing grainy security footage. A figure in dark clothing, moving near the motel's dumpsters, face partially visible in the security light. It looked like her. Same height, same build, same tactical movements. But it wasn't her. That's not me, Sarah said firmly. The timestamp says 11:47 p.m. on Sunday. Where were you? On Miller's Ridge, observing from public land. I didn't approach the motel. Can anyone verify that? Sarah's silence was answer enough. Morrison leaned forward. Sarah, Vincent Calabrese has filed a formal complaint. He's claiming harassment, stalking, and trespassing. The state police are taking it seriously. Of course he's filed a complaint, Sarah said, her frustration building. He's trying to shut down the investigation. Can't you see that? What I see, the state investigator said, is a former military member with PTSD conducting vigilante surveillance against a private citizen. PTSD, Sarah's voice sharpened. Who told you that? It's in your military medical records. Psychological counseling following a traumatic incident in Kabul. Sarah stood abruptly. You pulled my medical records. Routine background check, the investigator said calmly. Given the complaints against you, we needed to assess whether you posed a threat to yourself or others. This is unbelievable. Morrison's expression was pained. Sarah, sit down, please. No, Sarah grabbed her jacket. This is a setup. Calabrese knows I'm getting close, so he's using the system against me. That footage is fake or it's someone he sent to frame me. And now you're helping him by treating me like I'm the criminal. Nobody's saying that, Morrison said. Aren't you? You pulled my medical records. You're questioning my mental state. You're taking the word of a known mobster over mine. The state investigator's expression hardened. Ms. Reeves, we need you to cease all investigative activities related to Vincent Calabrese and the Riverside Motel. Consider this an official warning. Any further contact will result in charges. Sarah looked at Morrison. The chief couldn't meet her eyes. She walked out. That night, Sarah sat in her dark house, Jake Chen's journal open in front of her. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they formed was worse than she'd imagined. Calabrese hadn't just murdered Jake Chen. He'd prepared for her arrival weeks in advance. He'd known she was coming, had planted evidence to discredit her, and was now using the legal system to protect himself. Someone in the military or law enforcement had fed him information. Someone local was protecting him. Sarah thought about Gary Mitchell's hostility, about how quickly the state police had moved against her, about the mysterious person watching her surveillance position. The web was bigger than she'd thought. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Last warning. Leave town tonight or join Chen on that bridge. Sarah stared at the message for a long moment. Then she pulled out her laptop and began planning. They thought threats would scare her off. They thought her past trauma made her weak. They thought wrong. She'd learned long ago that the most dangerous warriors weren't the ones who'd never been broken. They were the ones who'd been shattered and chose to keep fighting anyway. Part 3, the breaking point. The suspension came the next morning. Chief Morrison delivered the news in person, standing uncomfortably in Sarah's doorway like a man preparing to deliver last rites. The state police insisted, he said, unable to meet her eyes. With the formal complaints and the security footage, I don't have a choice. You're suspended from any consulting work with the department, effective immediately. Sarah had expected this, but hearing it still felt like a punch to the gut. How long? Indefinitely, pending a full investigation. Morrison finally looked at her and she saw genuine pain in his weathered face. Sarah, I'm sorry. I brought you into this mess and now the mess is eating both of us, Sarah finished. They're not just protecting their operation, Chief. They're dismantling anyone who threatens it. I know, Morrison's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but my hands are tied. Gary's already talking to the commissioners about filing a lawsuit against the department for bringing you in. He's got half the force backing him. Gary's either dirty or he's a useful idiot, Sarah said flatly. Either way, he's helping murderers. Morrison flinched but didn't argue. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. This is for you, your last consulting payment. I wish I could do more. After he left, Sarah opened the envelope. Inside the check was a handwritten note on Morrison's personal stationery, Jake's storage unit, 47 at County Storage on Route 19, code 824, be careful. Sarah burned the note in her kitchen sink. County Storage was a sad collection of corrugated metal units outside town, the kind of place where people stored the remnants of failed businesses and broken marriages. Sarah arrived at dusk, when the autumn light was dying and shadows grew long. Unit 47 was in the back corner. Sarah entered the code, Jake and Linda's wedding anniversary, and the lock clicked open. Inside was a testament to a good cop's dedication, boxes of files, photographs pinned to a cork board, maps with routes marked in red ink. Jake had been building a case the old-fashioned way, piece by piece. Sarah spent 3 hours going through everything, her phone's flashlight casting stark shadows. What she found made her blood run cold. Jake hadn't just been tracking drug shipments. He'd uncovered a protection racket that reached into every corner of Belmont's economy. The Morty family, through Vincent Calabrese, had been systematically taking over legitimate businesses. The hardware store, the pharmacy, the auto repair shop, even Maggie's diner. They offered protection in exchange for monthly payments and the ability to use the businesses for money laundering. But the most damning evidence was a series of photographs showing Gary Mitchell meeting with Vincent Calabrese at the Riverside Motel. The photos were dated, time-stamped, and showed clear exchanges of what appeared to be envelopes, likely cash. Gary wasn't just obstructing the investigation. He was on Calabrese's payroll. Sarah photographed everything with her phone, uploading copies to a secure cloud account. Then she found something that made her hands shake, a USB drive taped to the underside of one of the file boxes, labeled simply, Insurance. She pocketed it, knowing she'd found what Jake had died protecting. She was closing the storage unit when headlights swept across the facility entrance. 2 vehicles, a black Escalade and a sedan, the same vehicles she'd seen at the Riverside Motel. Sarah killed her flashlight and moved silently to the back of the unit, her military training taking over. She counted at least 4 men emerging from the vehicles, moving with the purposeful coordination of professionals. They'd been watching the storage facility. Or someone had told them she'd be here. Check every unit, a voice commanded. Vincent Calabrese's distinctive rasp carried across the quiet facility. The seal bitch has to be here somewhere. Sarah weighed her options. She was unarmed. Civilians didn't carry weapons in small Pennsylvania towns, and her concealed carry permit was tied to her military service. She could run, but they'd hear her. She could fight, but 4 against 1 was poor odds even for a SEAL. Instead, she did what had saved her life in Afghanistan. She became invisible. Sarah climbed silently into the rafters of the storage unit, wedging herself between support beams and the corrugated metal roof. Below, she could hear the men moving closer, opening units, searching. "Boss, most of these are locked," one of them called out. "Then unlock them," Calabrese snapped. "Bolt cutters now." The sound of metal being cut echoed through the facility. They were working their way toward her position. Sarah controlled her breathing, slowed her heart rate, became stone. This was just another reconnaissance mission, just another night surviving behind enemy lines. The men reached Unit 47. Sarah heard the bolt cutters snap her lock. "This one's been opened recently," someone observed. fresh scratches on the mechanism. Then she's been here. Calabrese's voice was directly below Sarah now. Search it, everything. For 20 agonizing minutes, Sarah remained motionless in the rafters while 4 men tore apart Jake Chen's carefully organized investigation. They found the files, the photographs, the cork board with its web of connections. All of this, Calabrese said, loaded in the vehicle, we burn it tonight. What about the woman? She's not here, but she's been here, which means she knows too much. A pause. It's time to send another message, something that will make even a SEAL think twice. The men loaded Jake's evidence into their vehicles and drove away. Sarah waited 30 minutes in the rafters before climbing down, her muscles screaming from the sustained tension. The storage unit was empty now, everything Jake had died for stolen. But they hadn't found the USB drive in her pocket. And they didn't know she'd uploaded copies of everything to the cloud. As Sarah drove away from county storage, she noticed a car following her. Not trying to hide it either, they wanted her to know she was being watched, wanted her to feel the fear. She led them on a winding route through town, nodding their tactics, their distance, their pattern. Former law enforcement or military, definitely. Too professional to be street thugs. Finally, Sarah pulled into the parking lot of Maggie's diner. It was 9 p.m., nearly closing time, but a few customers remained inside. Witnesses. The sedan parked 3 spaces away but didn't exit, just watched. Sarah went inside, ordered coffee she didn't want, and sat where she could observe the sedan. The driver was alone, male, middle-aged. He made no attempt to hide, just sat there like a statue. Maggie approached her booth. You okay, hun? You look like you've seen a ghost. Just tired. That car been following you. So even Maggie had noticed. Sarah nodded. Maggie's expression hardened. I'm calling the police. Don't, Sarah caught her wrist gently. Please, it'll only make things worse. Sarah, what's going on? The whole town's talking. They say you've been harassing people, that you're having some kind of breakdown. Do you believe that? Maggie studied her for a long moment. I believe you're trying to do right by Jake Chen, but I also believe you're in over your head, and these people, whoever they are, they're not playing around. Neither am I. That's what worries me. Maggie glanced at the sedan. Jake thought he could take them on alone too. Look where that got him. The words hung in the air like an accusation. After Maggie walked away, Sarah sat in the booth, drinking cold coffee and watching her watcher. The message was clear. You're alone. We can get to you anytime. Give up. Her phone buzzed. A text from Linda Chen. Someone broke into my house tonight. They didn't take anything, just went through Jake's office. The kids are terrified. Please, Sarah, I can't do this anymore. Just let it go. Sarah's hands clenched around her phone. They were escalating, widening the circle of terror. Jake's widow, his children. Another text, this one from an unknown number. Check your truck. Sarah's blood went cold. She stood slowly, walked outside, the sedan's driver watching her approach her Ford. There on the windshield was a photograph. It showed Sarah's rental house, taken from inside. Her living room, her bedroom. Someone had been inside her home while she was at the storage facility. Written on the photo in red marker, "You're next." Sarah stood in the parking lot, the autumn wind cutting through her jacket, staring at the violation. They'd been in her home. They'd gone through her things. They'd proven they could reach her anywhere. The sedan's window rolled down. The driver was smiling. This was the breaking point they wanted. The moment where fear overcame courage, where the rational choice was to run, to save herself, to admit defeat. Sarah looked at the photo one more time, then tore it in half. She walked directly to the sedan, leaned down to the driver's window. The man inside was in his 50s, with cold eyes and a scar on his left cheek. The same description Jake had written in his journal. Tell Calabrese I'm not going anywhere, Sarah said quietly. The man's smile widened. He thought you'd say that. That's why tomorrow morning you're going to wake up to a very unpleasant surprise. Consider it a preview of what happens to people who don't listen to warnings. He drove away. Sarah stood in the parking lot, watching the taillights disappear. Her phone was already in her hand, pulling up the security camera app she'd installed in her rental house after the first threats. The footage showed two men entering through her back door 4 hours ago. They'd spent 20 minutes going through her belongings, methodical and professional. Before leaving, they'd placed something in her bedroom closet. Sarah zoomed in on the footage. A package, small, wrapped in brown paper. Her military training kicked in immediately. She called 911. "There's a possible explosive device at my residence," she reported calmly, giving the address. "I need the bomb squad." Then she called Chief Morrison. "They planted something in my house," she said when he answered. "I need you to evacuate the neighboring homes, now." To Morrison's credit, he didn't ask questions. On it. Sarah drove toward her house but parked 2 blocks away. Within 20 minutes, fire trucks, police cars, and an ambulance had responded. Neighbors stood on their lawns in pajamas and robes, frightened and confused. Gary Mitchell arrived, saw Sarah standing by her truck, and marched over. "What the hell did you do?" he demanded. "Someone broke into my house and left a package in my closet. I reported it." "This is bullshit. You're manufacturing drama to justify your paranoia." "Then you go check the closet," Sarah said evenly. "Be my guest." Gary's face reddened, but he didn't move. The bomb squad arrived 40 minutes later from the county seat. Sarah watched them enter her house in full gear, their robot going in first. 15 minutes later, the bomb tech emerged and approached Chief Morrison. Sarah was close enough to hear. "It's not a bomb," the tech said. "It's a dead dog, German Shepherd, throat cut. Someone left it gift-wrapped in the closet." Sarah felt bile rise in her throat, not just any German Shepherd. They'd sent her a message using the same breed as Jake's K9, Atlas. Morrison looked like he might be sick. Jesus Christ. "There's more," the tech continued. "There's a note pinned to the collar. It says, 'You're next. Leave town or we'll hang you beside your boyfriend Chen.'" The words carried across the quiet street. Neighbors gasped. Police officers exchanged uncomfortable glances. Gary Mitchell actually laughed. You see what happens when you play vigilante. You bring this on yourself." Sarah turned to him slowly. "A murdered police officer and his K9, threats against civilians, breaking and entering, and your response is to blame the victim." "You're not a victim, Reeves. You're a liability." "Then arrest me," Sarah said. "Right now, arrest me for whatever you think I've done wrong." Gary stepped closer, his voice dropping. "I don't need to arrest you. You're already finished in this town. Nobody trusts you. Nobody wants you here. And after tonight, everyone's going to see you for what you really are. A washed-up soldier with PTSD who can't let go of the war." Sarah held his gaze. "And what are you, Officer Mitchell? A corrupt cop protecting mobsters, or just a coward who's too scared to face the truth?" Gary's hand went to his service weapon. "Watch yourself." "Enough," Morrison stepped between them. "Both of you stand down." But the damage was done. Every officer, every neighbor, every witness had seen the confrontation. By morning, the whole town would be talking about the unstable SEAL who'd provoked a police officer. Sarah walked back to her truck. She couldn't go home. Her house was a crime scene now, contaminated by the dead K9 and the message of terror. She had nowhere to go. No support. No allies. No evidence. It had all been stolen from the storage unit. She was exactly where Calabrese wanted her, isolated, discredited, and vulnerable. Sarah sat in her truck and pulled out the USB drive she'd taken from Jake's storage unit. She plugged it into her laptop. The files opened, spreadsheets, transaction records, encrypted communications. Jake had documented everything: payments, shipments, names, dates. It was enough to bring down Calabrese's entire operation. But it was also enough to get Sarah killed. She thought about Danny Vasquez, the young Marine who died saving her life in Kabul. She'd promised herself she'd never let another good person die because she failed to act. Jake Chen had been a good person. Linda Chen had asked Sarah to make sure everyone knew Jake died a hero. Sarah looked up at her rental house, surrounded by police tape and flashing lights. She thought about the dead dog in her closet, the threats, the corruption, the fear. Then she opened her laptop and began composing an email. She attached every file from Jake's USB drive, every photo she'd taken at the storage unit, and a detailed account of everything she'd uncovered. She addressed it to the FBI's Philadelphia field office, the Pennsylvania State Police Internal Affairs Division, and 3 investigative journalists who specialized in organized crime. Her finger hovered over the send button. Once she sent this, there would be no going back. Calabrese and his organization would know she'd escalated beyond their control. They'd come for her with everything they had. But if she didn't send it, Jake Chen's sacrifice would be for nothing. Sarah pressed send. Then she made one more call. "Chief Morrison," she said when he answered, "I need you to protect Linda Chen and her children. Get them somewhere safe, tonight." "Sarah, what did you do?" What Jake would have wanted. What should have been done the day he died. Sarah hung up and started her truck. She drove to the old warehouse district on the edge of town, an abandoned industrial area where nobody would look for her. She parked inside a condemned factory and sat in the darkness, waiting. They would come for her now. She'd forced their hand. But Sarah Reeves had been in worse situations. She'd survived Taliban ambushes and IED attacks. She'd carried wounded Marines through enemy fire and held defensive positions against overwhelming odds. This was just another battlefield. And she was done retreating. As the night deepened around her, Sarah checked her weapons: a crowbar from her truck, a tactical flashlight, and her own highly trained hands. Not much against armed mobsters, but she'd worked with less. Her phone buzzed one final time. Unknown number. The message was simple: "Sunrise, the railroad bridge where we hung Chen. Come alone or we start with his widow." Sarah stared at the message for a long moment. Then she typed back, "I'll be there." She leaned back in her truck's driver's seat, closed her eyes, and began to prepare mentally for what was coming. This was the breaking point. But breaking points could go 2 ways. They could shatter you into pieces too small to ever rebuild. Or they could forge you into something harder than you'd ever been before. Sarah knew which one she'd choose.